of the St. Mary's College, Pune, Dattatreya Kadam College, Central University of Odisha, and the Research Committee 14, Globalization and Society of Indian Sociological Society. Extend a very hearty welcome to our to the second session of our lecture series. And we have an eminent speaker with us, Dr. Rituparna Patgiri, who will be speaking on politics of healthy food, global and local issues in urban India. A very warm welcome to Dr. Rituparna Patgiri here for accepting and being present here. Dr. Rituparna Patgiri is an assistant professor of sociology in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. She has earlier taught at Thapar School of Liberal Arts and Science, Thapar Institute of Engineering and Technology, Patiala Indraprastha College for Women, University of Delhi, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi, and Guwahati University. Patgiri has been a recipient of Krishna Raj Fellowship, the Zuban Saskwa Peace Foundation grant for the young researchers from the Northeast, the Venner Grant Foundation grant, the Indian Institute of Technology Guwahati Startup grant, and the Indian Council of Social Science Research grant. Her research interests lie in exploring questions of culture, food, media, gender, and pedagogy. Dr. Patgiri is passionate about making academic knowledge accessible to the public. She's one of the co-founders of Doing Sociology, an academic blog dedicated to promoting sociological consciousness among the young students and scholars. Dr. Patgiri is currently serving as an associate editor of Society, a peer-reviewed Scopus Index journal published by Springer's Nature that explores the latest scholarship on the central questions of contemporary society. She's also the convener of ad hoc group 05, Food, Culture and Society of the Indian Sociological Society. At present, Dr. Patgiri is working on 3 book projects, a co-edited book titled The Social Nature of Food in India to be published in Bhargan Books, a monograph titled Mobile Theatres of Assam, A Story of Resistance, Consumption and Culture to be published by Routledge, India, and an co-edited book titled Sociology of Gender in India, Contemporary Issues and Perspectives to be published in Cambridge University Press. I have actually not met Dr. Rituparna in person, but it doesn't really feel that I have not met her at all. I feel I've already met her because she is so active in her online presence. We don't feel that we have not met. I'm sure you're not hearing this for the first time. So a very warm welcome to you, Dr. Rituparna. We look forward to hearing from you. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Dipti, for that very kind and generous introduction and the words. Thank you to RC14, Globalization and Society of the ISS, to St. Mira's College, Vaishali Divakar, Vaishali Joshi, and everyone else, the Patgiri Kadam College and Central University of Orissa, Koraput, for giving me this opportunity. I am excited to share some of my research from the latest paper or project that I have been working on. And it's tentatively titled The Politics of Healthy Food, Global and Local Issues in Urban India. And I thought that this would be the perfect audience to speak to, considering the lecture series being titled Globalization and Society. Well, it's not also an easy task to follow Professor Maitri Chaudhary, but let me try my best to keep it as engaging as possible. For the introduction of this project, I actually started thinking about healthy food since the pandemic, because it marked this renewed focus on health for Indians. Although we know that when it comes to eating healthy food in the context of this country, there is a huge historical background. We have Ayurvedic prescriptions and different kinds of ideas about what constitutes healthy food. And some of these ideas, in fact, have seeped into how we have looked at managing diseases as well as the neoliberalist ideas of health. I'm sorry, I think there's some disruption.
Somebody's
Yep. I request everybody, please keep yourself on mute mode. You can, like last lecture, you can send your queries in the chat box and we can take it after at the end of the lecture, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that. Right. So as I was saying, when one thinks about the element of health, it's not a new thing in the Indian context because there are several prescriptions and prescriptions about food, not just from medical experts and health practitioners, but even lay people. There's a lot of talk about how a healthy lifestyle is important to fight certain kinds of diseases. And this was very evident, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, as people were saying that, oh, if you eat a nutritious diet, you can keep the pandemic at bay. It was not surprising that some of these ideas of what constituted healthy food were also formed through very commonsensical perceptions. Now, this emphasis on eating healthy is not new. Indian food practices have been traditionally governed by health-related rules and regulations, as R.S. Khare in his celebrated work has already told us as part of the sociological literature on food. Diet and dietary advice have been important parts of both Indian and Western political thought. And in the pre-liberalization era, the health discourse in India centered around public health concerns like management of epidemics and diseases, fertility rates and population growth, because India was a largely poor and overpopulated country. But in the 1990s, there has been a shift towards health concerns of the more privileged. And this was in response to the rising consumption of fast foods and the growing number of non-communicable diseases, as sociologist V. Sujata has argued. And this is evident even in media representations. For instance, in the 1990s, most magazines and newspapers carried extensive content on health, including advertisements. And Professor Maitri Chaudhary's paper on print media and advertisements tell us how the focus of a global India, or an India that was aspiring to be global, changed because the understanding of health was not just about, controlling population or managing epidemics, but also looking healthy and fit. So there have been several advertisements about primarily looking at bodies, especially women's bodies, in terms of, their outlook. But what changed during the pandemic is actually the digitalization of health-related food practices. And why is the digitalization part important? It's because, as per the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology of Government of India, we have more than 800 million internet users, which makes it the largest connected nation. And there is active consumption of digital content by people, particularly the youth, across the country. Just to give you some more data, India has more than 50% of its population below the age of 25, which means that it is the country with the largest youth cohort. And many of these Indians spend a lot of time watching online videos, which is far higher than the global average. All of this is data from government sources and newspaper reports. Commonsensically, when we think about watching videos, I think we are all a part of the menace, because we can find people watching reels anywhere now. And this is actually a representation of that. More than half of the Indian youth aged 9 to 17 spend over 3 hours daily on social media and gaming, according to a national survey that was conducted in 2023. So this digitalization was actually further accelerated during the pandemic, and there was a soaring rise in the use of the internet and digital or non-cash modes of payment. People have also started using digital applications like Practo, NetMeds, and Arogya Setu for tracking symptoms of the virus, connecting with doctors and medical practitioners, and making themselves aware of healthy food and lifestyle. So there is a lot of health content available in all forms of digital media, and one can call it a communication quantitative abundance, as Keen would suggest. There is an overload of visuals and information. Now, ideas of what then constitutes is good for health and not populate the internet. And the World Health Organization also called it an infodemic to describe the spread of inaccurate information, rumors, and conspiracies related to the virus during the pandemic. For instance, you will remember that one of the most popular health tips during the pandemic was that if we consume vitamin C and D, we would reduce the chances of catching the virus. Now, tips like these are often backed by so-called scientific studies, but then when you look at the verifiability of it, there is often something which is wrong. So there were these examples of people overdosing on vitamin D pandemic. But then recent studies by medical experts have claimed that excessive consumption of giloy can cause liver injury and damage. So what you can see is that there is a marketization of healthy food, which is sort of, in a way, influenced, as I would argue, by both global and local factors. One last example, there was even an anti-corona sweet or mishti, which is the Bengali word for sweet, that was created by Hindustan Sweets, a Kolkata-based sweet shop, to spread awareness about the virus. So essentially, what constitutes healthy food is a controversial topic, along with the idea of who has expertise on what is healthy. The pandemic particularly proved to be a background for the exchange of words and commentaries between the Indian Medical Association, the IMA, which is a professional body of biomedical practitioners, and Baba Ramdev of Patanjali, which is a private company selling Ayurvedic products. So what happened is that, as Sujata had argued, that the relative efficacy of biomedicine and Ayurveda has always existed in the Indian context. There have been medical pluralism, but in the pandemic, it was very difficult to see this kind of medical pluralism, as one was trying to up the other, backed primarily by these digital ways of spreading misinformation. So this is the background in which I sort of started thinking about the study. And the idea was to sort of explore how we can think about the notions of healthy food and how it is created when we are thinking in that context marked by the pandemic and also overt digitalization. So this is an empirical study, and the field site, especially for this paper, is New Delhi. I'm planning to do fieldwork also in Auroville and Guwahati, which I have not yet done. So most of my findings are from New Delhi. It's primarily a qualitative study, and the timeline is from 2023 onwards. I have mostly relied on interviews and content analysis, and the target group of my study has been upper middle class youth, which has an intersection with upper caste and Hindu identities. The age bracket, since it's the youth, is 20 to 35 years. And so far, I have interviewed 20 people, 12 women, and 8 men. The income range is important because I'm going to talk about what and how you procure healthy food. And therefore, if you see, it's around 1 lakh to 1.5 lakh per month, which is more than 12 lakhs, or around 13 lakhs per year. Now, what are the research questions that have shaped this study? Some of the research questions that I have sort of tried to address are perceptions and ideas of healthy food that people have. If these perceptions get translated into actual food consumption practices, the factors that influence and shape these perceptions, and how this idea of healthy food is facilitated by the digital. So are some of these factors global? Are they local? What is it that constitutes healthy food for this upper middle class section in a metro city in India, particularly if you look at the urbanization process and how they come to think about food itself. So one of the perceptions, not surprisingly, of healthy food that I came across amongst this crowd is that healthy food is organic. So what exactly is organic? And there have been several studies on organic food. Primarily, organic food is described as food which is produced without chemicals, contains zero refined or added sugar, no trans or saturated fat, and they are seen as healthy. Sujata's forthcoming chapter on organic food also sort of locates the idea of organic food as free from chemicals in a South Indian village. And the consumption of fruits, vegetables, dry fruits, and milk is seen as part of a healthy and organic lifestyle. This perception of organic food is also tied to the perception that people have of fast food, which Freeman would argue is now seen as one kind of food oppression. What exactly is food oppression? Food oppression is also forcing people to have similar kind of food, homogeneous items, which becomes part of the new liberal diet. Now, there have been several scholars, including sociologists like Rituparna, who have talked about the neoliberal diet. So what happened is that after the Green Revolution in India, because there was mass industrialization and production of food, the diet became very standardized across the country, particularly in the northern belt of the country. So many of the millets, many of the indigenous kind of food items that were available to people in their plates vanished from, their cultural consumption. The reason being that wheat and rice became much more affordable, and also we should remember that they have been part of dealing with India's nutrition and hunger issues, because they have been distributed as part of the free ration or the public distribution system. So that meant that a majority of these rices or grains that were actually closer to nature all disappeared from the diets. So the neoliberal diet is feeding people heavy amounts of carbohydrates and fats, and this is a worldwide phenomena. It's a global phenomena. A lot has been written, in fact, on the neoliberal diet in the US, and why US has become such a hotbed of obesity and non-communicable diseases. So Matejowski calls this phenomena globacity, the global prevalence of obesity. In fact, you will hear very often now that India has also become a hotbed of non-communicable diseases, with a lot of cases of diabetes, hypertension, and thyroid, PCOD rising, particularly amongst the youth. So in contrast to this kind of a neoliberal diet, which is seen as one type of food oppression, along with the prevalence of fast food and processed food, which is very easy to find in supermarkets, there is a shift to organic food, which is seen as healthy. However, the contention is that when we are thinking about this shift, it is a very, very elitist kind of transformation, because organic food is very expensive. So the question of who the consumers are is important, that there is a class angle to how we think about organic food. So when Tulasi Srinivas and Krishnendu Ray talked about how you find packaged foods in countries where migrants from India traveled to, they were actually talking about how migrants carried food that their mothers made. Tulasi Srinivas, in her article on As My Mother Made It, Packaged Foods Amongst Indian Migrants in the US, talks about the idea of recreating some of these food items from the past or one's homeland. But then that very fast food packaging and processing at a global level has created this shift to organic food or small level, farming. We also call it slow cooking in the sociological literature, or the slow food movement. In this context, it's also interesting to sort of see the role of state policies, primarily because the state has now moved towards pushing for millets. And in fact, the year 2022 was declared as the International Year of Millets. So the state now has gone back to the idea of consuming millets and telling people that you should buy millets. However, the problem that exists at one level is that millets are not affordable to a large majority of the Indians. So when we are thinking about millets or any other foods which are seen as organic, the class question is very, very integral to the understanding of it, primarily because the digital ease of availability as well, in the way that you could order it, in the way that you could choose it, is also available to people who have access to those digital means. So let me give you a few examples from the study that I conducted in terms of how people bought and consume these organic foods. One of the interesting sites that a lot of people referred to was called Sattvic Foods or the Swadeshi Way, which promote healthy organic food. And the mottos of these sites are also very interesting. They say that we challenge ourselves to source the best of health products, which is the tagline of Sattvic Foods. And then you have Swadeshi Way, which says that we promote healthy organic food that transforms India's villages. So what you can see is that there is also a concern for India's villages, the farmers, because the neoliberal diet that we are talking about is also associated with an exploitative capitalist market, which has a very global kind of focus. So the organic food movement in India, although it's not as big as the one that has been happening in the West for quite some time now, is tied to these questions of how globally food items are perceived. So essentially, there is a recognition that there is a need to shift to organic food. But I wanted to show this data from a recent study, which is titled Income and Wealth Inequality in India, 1922 to 2023, the rise of the billionaire Raj. And as you can see, top 1% in India holds 40% wealth, which means that the income inequity is huge. And when we are talking about a shift to an organic or a millet-based diet, which category of Indians are we targeting? That is the major question. Again, this is a table sourced from Oxfam International. And as you can see, many ordinary Indians are not able to access the healthcare they need. And many of them are pushed into poverty because of healthcare cost every year. So when we are talking about healthy food, it is particularly a very different kind of category of Indians that we are talking about.
Rituparna, sorry to interrupt. Is it possible for you to just, at least the few prominent points to say it in Hindi? Would it be too difficult?
Okay.
There are many students who have joined from the regional background institutes.
I'm comfortable in Hindi. I didn't know that I was supposed to speak in Hindi.
No, just little bit bilingual if you could do.
Thank
you so much. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. My Hindi is not that good, but it's चल जाएगा. So अगर आप देख सकते हैं स्क्रीन में, जैसे कि मैं बात कर रही थी कि कौन ऑर्गेनिक फूड ऑर्डर करता है, एक ये ब्लिंकिट का एड है, आप देख सकते हैं कि इसमें लिखा है फार्म टू फ्रिज इन 10 मिनट्स. एंड एक ये जेप्टो का एड है, इसमें लिखा है हेल्थ फ्री गेट ग्रीन्स इन 10 मिनट्स. अगेन फोकस इस बात पे है कि आप कैसे ऑर्डर कर रहे हो. ऐसे 10 मिनट में आप बिल्कुल हेल्दी खाना अपने घर पे पा सकते हो, लेकिन डिफरेंस ये है कि कौन घर पे मंगवा रहा है और कौन डिलीवर कर रहा है. सो जो मंगवा रहा है वो अपर कास्ट कैटेगरी ऑफ इंडियंस हो गए, लेकिन जो ऑर्डर डिलीवरी दे रहे हैं वो डिलीवरी वर्कर्स है जो अपने बेयर मिनिमम वेजेस के लिए भी लड़ रहे हैं कंपनीज के साथ. तो आइडिया ये है कि ऑर्गेनिक फूड को प्रमोट तो कर रहे हैं, लेकिन उसका किस सेक्शन ऑफ इंडियंस के साथ कनेक्शन है उसका थोड़ा सा हमें सोचना भी चाहिए कि हाउ डू वी एक्सप्लोर दैट फर्दर. सो who eats organic food and how do we see it tied to the question of environment and sustainability is something that I would also want to explore more. अभी जब हम बात करते हैं एनवायरनमेंट की, तो ये एक समस्या है या इशू है जिसपे सभी स्टेक होल्डर्स डेलिबरेट करते हैं, बी इट एकेडमिशियंस या पॉलिसी मेकर्स या अगर आप नॉर्मल यूथ से भी बात करें तो सब लोगों को कुछ ना कुछ कहना होता है. बहुत लोग बात करते हैं कि क्लाइमेट चेंज के पीछे भी एक ये रीजन है कि खाने में बहुत चेंज हुआ है. वैसे अगर आप रिसर्च पे जाएंगे तो बात कहीं ना कहीं सच भी है, क्योंकि जो क्वेश्चन है एनवायरमेंटली सस्टेनेबल होने का वो थोड़ा थोड़ा एथिकली ग्राउंडेड है इस आइडिया में कि हमें ऑर्गेनिक शिफ्ट करना चाहिए। सो जब मैं पहले बात करी थी कि हमारे प्लेट से डाइवर्सिटी लूज हो गया है, जैसे कि अब जब हम राजस्थानी खाने के बारे में सोचते हैं तो ऑटोमेटिकली वी थिंक अबाउट गट्टे की सब्जी, कढ़ी एंड वेरी डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ कार्बोहाइड्रेट एंड हैवी फूड आइटम्स। लेकिन अगर आप राजस्थानी खाने का बात करते हैं और केर सांगा भूल जाते हैं, इसका मतलब ये भी है कि हमें जो हिस्ट्री है मे बी 50 years बिफोर वो भी याद नहीं है, क्योंकि the sag used to be a part of the plate, the vegetables, which now we don't even think of in terms of a Rajasthani food plate. Ironically, there is also a shift for vegetarianism or veganism as preferred food choices. So, बहुत सारे जो ये upper middle class youth है, ये कहते हैं कि अगर vegetarianism या veganism में shift करेंगे तो environment के लिए अच्छा है, क्योंकि veganism as a principle of consumption of food is better environmentally. अब इस बात को अगर हम ग्लोबली देखें तो veganism as a movement has been very actively followed in many Western countries, and if you look at countries like Germany and Poland, veganism movement is very strong now. In fact, अगर आप 10-15 साल पहले जर्मनी गए होंगे, आपको ज्यादा शाकाहारी खाने का ऑप्शन नहीं मिला होगा, लेकिन अगर आप अभी जाओगे तो आपको बहुत सारे शाकाहारी खाने का ऑप्शन मिलेगा, क्योंकि वो वेगनिज्म का जो प्रभाव है वो आ चुका है वेस्ट में। लेकिन जो वहां के वेगनिज्म है, वहां के वेजिटेरियनिज्म या वेगनिज्म का इंडिया से क्या डिफरेंस है? The difference is that here, when we are talking about vegetarianism, there is an intricate connection to caste, which we cannot forget, primarily because food and caste have been integrally connected in the Indian context, and in many northern, southern contexts, and particularly belts, upper caste have not necessarily consumed meat and other forms of non-vegetarian food items. So that is why when the youth tell us that they want to eat a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet, there is also a need of criticality. मैं इसमें थोड़ा सा डेटा भी शेयर कर देती हूँ। इवन एक स्टडी जो YouGov इंडिया ने कंडक्ट किया था amongst 2033 participants in the year 2023, 59% respondents expressed a strong likelihood of considering a vegan diet. लेकिन जब आप इस डेटा को कंसिडर करेंगे, ये भी थोड़ा देखिए कि ये सर्वे ऑनलाइन हुआ था, एंड देयरफॉर जो लोग इसको भर रहे थे वो प्राइमरीली अपर मिडिल क्लास एंड अर्बन सेंट्रिक थे, विच मीन्स कि जो हमारा डेटा कलेक्शन प्रोसेस है उसमें भी एक तरीके का लूप होल है. There is also a lack of awareness about the historical and social context of how vegetarianism and veganism are practiced in India. Like I said, that food, if it is marked by strict ideas of purity and pollution that govern what one should eat and what should not, then we have to also think about whether or not talking about vegetarianism and veganism as it is globally done can be done in the regional context. और आप लोगों को ये भी पता होगा कि not just caste, ethnicity and regional locations भी dietary choices को influence करते हैं. For instance, in the northeastern region of India, there are several eastern states जहाँ पे खाने को लेके बहुत डिस्क्रिमिनेशन और मार्जिनलाइजेशन होता है, क्योंकि ऐसा सोचा जाता है कि वो लोग गंदा खाना खाते हैं. As Dolly Kikon would argue, they eat dirty and smelly food, and therefore when they come to metropolitan cities like Delhi, there is racism and also stereotype against the way that they eat. जैसे कि कोविड-19 पेंडेमिक में बैट मीट एक मेजर कॉज ऑफ द आउटब्रेक ऑफ द वायरस कंसिडर किया जा रहा था, एंड उस टाइम पे बहुत सारे चाइनीज लोगों को वेस्ट में हॉस्टिलिटी फेस करने को मिला था. Similarly, a lot of people from the northeast were also seen as carriers of the virus, and then बहुत लोगों ने चिकन खाना भी बंद कर दिया था क्यों इतना misinformation spread हो चुका था. So in a way, when we think about organic food and veganism, ये context थोड़ा सा हमें mind में रखना चाहिए कि who are the people who can afford to eat organic food and also talk about vegetarianism and veganism. मैं एक ये स्लाइड दिखाना चाह रही हूँ। इसमें जैसे आप देख सकते हैं, पतंजलि के मैनेजर ने न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स को बोला था कि पीपल इन असम हैव बैड हैबिट्स एंड देयर इज अ नीड टू मेंटली कंडीशन देम, क्योंकि वो लोग मांस खाते हैं। सिमिलरली गुजरात में नॉनवेज फूड स्टॉल्स को रास्तों से बंद कर दिया था, ये बोल के कि वो अनहाइजीनिक है और ट्रैफिक ऑब्स्ट्रक्शन होता है। So there is also a way in which non-vegetarian food is policed. The point that I'm therefore trying to make is that while globally the movement for veganism critiques capitalism as an exploitative and mass industrialized kind of system, saying that the overconsumption of meat and the way that the cow meat particularly is processed has environmentally devastating consequences. In the Indian context, vegetarianism and veganism both have to be socially understood. First of all, they are elite options, and second of all, if you eat meat, there are also strict conditions, and also in many cases now there is a threat to life that you can face. So there is a dilemma in which how the global and the local interact when we are constructing the idea of a healthy food. So even when meat may not be healthy because there are these factors associated, the sociological way of understanding it is that one has to connect it to how certain people see it as an attack on their food habits. Next, I would also want to talk a little bit about weight and appearance, which are new concerns when it comes to healthy food. जैसे कि मैंने पहले बोला कि जब प्री 1990s एरा में हेल्थ मैनेजमेंट था इंडिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, उसमें ज्यादा फोकस इसमें था कि पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल करे और लोग मरे ना। ये भी था कि देख ले कि इन्फेंट मोर्टालिटी रेट कम हो जाए, या फिर जो मटरनल मोर्टालिटी रेट है वो कम हो जाए, कि लोग बचे रहे, लाइफ एक्सपेक्टेंसी भी बढ़ जाए, क्योंकि फोकस ऐसा था कि पहले लोगों को का जो जिंदगी का उम्र है वो बढ़ाना है। लेकिन अब धीरे धीरे आफ्टर 1990s एक शिफ्ट आ गया, क्योंकि हम अब हेल्थ के बारे में जब सोचते हैं तो एक अपीयरेंस के थ्रू भी सोचते हैं, हम बॉडी वेट का भी ध्यान रखते हैं। So this idea of the keto diet and intermittent fasting are two things that I would want to talk about, primarily because one can see how the global and the local interact in these two ways of weight management. Interestingly, जब हम weight management की बात करते हैं तो automatically they become ways of health management also. So this was one of the most interesting parts of my research. I became a part of a WhatsApp group of intermittent fasters, and they all shared a very meticulous pictures and photographs of their everyday diets, in which they said, I'm eating this, I'm eating that, I'm going to the gym, मैं 16 घंटे फास्ट कर रही हूँ, मैं 18 घंटे फास्ट कर रहा हूँ। और बहुत ही अच्छे तरीके से वो ग्रुप मैनेज कर हो रहा था, क्योंकि जो उस ग्रुप को चला रहे थे वो एक डॉक्टर थे। सो जो इंफॉर्मेशन वो दे रहे थे वो सबको लगता था कि साइंटिफिकली बैक्ड है। In contrast, there were people and individuals whom I interviewed जो YouTube देख के भी intermittent fasting follow कर रहे थे या फिर ये keto diet। अब वो हमेशा लेकिन एक डाउट में भी थे कि क्या पता हम लोग कुछ गलत कर रहे हैं एंड हमारे हेल्थ पे असर पड़ेगा। लेकिन जब उनसे पूछा गया कि आप डॉक्टर को क्यों नहीं कंसल्ट करते हो या फिर न्यूट्रिशनिस्ट को क्यों नहीं कंसल्ट करते हो, their answers were very interesting. Some of them would say that we have a disposable income or a good income as you can see, लेकिन हमारे पास कोई हेल्थ बेनिफिट्स नहीं है एंड हमें प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल में जाने पड़ते हैं जहाँ पे बहुत एक्सपेंसिव है, हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस भी नहीं है। अब ये सुन के कि इतना हाई इनकम ग्रुप है फिर भी वो अपने हेल्थ के बारे में ऐसे सोच रहे कि वो इन्वेस्ट नहीं कर सकते हैं एक डॉक्टर में या मेडिकल एडवाइस में, लेकिन खुद से वो सेल्फ गाइड ले रहे हैं। बहुत सारे लोगों का ये भी कहना था कि जो डिजिटल में इंफॉर्मेशन मिल रहा है वो काफी सही है एंड किसी ना किसी को बेनिफिट हुआ था तो वो भी बेनिफिटेड रहेंगे। The other important or interesting thing was also how many of these people said कि we can also talk to people outside. So ये डॉक्टर ना वेस्ट में है, तो मैं उनसे भी बात कर सकती हूँ, उनका भी एडवाइस ले सकती हूँ, बहुत ज्यादा सस्ता है. So you could see how there was a faith in some unknown stranger just because they had a global appearance, and you could communicate with them through the digital mode. However, that kind of faith was not there in the medical system. And a lot of people said that, we don't believe in doctors in this capitalist system, which was observation to also hear. Particularly with the pandemic, there were perceptions about the medical community also, and how these perceptions then shaped the people who were taking, health advices. When it comes to keto diet, it was very interesting also to see how many of them shifted to eating Western or what we call global food items. So they would spend a lot of money on buying food items like avocado, blueberry, strawberry, क्योंकि उनको लगता है कि ये healthy है, क्योंकि Western diet में है. And there was a contrast drawn between Indian heavy oily food and the Western kind of food items that they could eat. Again, it often reminded me of the class angle, because when we are thinking about these professionals, एक बात जो ये लोग खुद भी बोलते थे कि हम लोग सेडेंटरी लाइफस्टाइल प्रैक्टिस करते हैं, ज्यादातर ऑफिस में काम करते हैं लैपटॉप के साथ, तो एक्सरसाइज नहीं हो पाती है. तो जो इंडियन खाना है वो हजम नहीं होता है. वो पहले हो जाता था क्योंकि सब लोग काम करते थे, लेकिन हम लोग उतना काम नहीं कर पाते, तो वो हजम नहीं होता है. So there was also this understanding that the food ideas of healthy food needed to be transformed in terms of calorie management, how many calories we need, and also because the lifestyle that they have is very much sedentary. So there is a self-management aspect to health, and the role of digital information channels and communities is very, very key. Especially in this WhatsApp group, everybody greeted each other with good morning and good night. There was so much exchange about what they ate every day. So there's also a lot of literature now on digital fandom groups and how there are digital communities that are being forged. And this is one example of how food, especially dieting in this context, was bringing people together. So once I posed this question about intermittent fasting in the group by asking a very simple thing that, fasting has been part of religious lifestyles across religions, especially when I can think of Hinduism and Islam, either the Ramadan fasting or the several fasts that we have within Hindu religion also. And then most of them said that, yes, this is one aspect of religion which can be, taken up in a global cosmopolitan world as well, where the cleansing of the body is something that they would like to practice. So in a way, when there are these very cosmopolitan Indians earning quite well, if you think about it, also talking about healthy food, there was this expression of food being a part of their bodies, but also as something which was making them healthier. Now, this is a contrast to some of the people that I interviewed who were older in their age, because for them, it was a very big sacrifice to be made in terms of taste. Many of them said that, yes, we will do the walking and we will do the exercising, but I'm not going to compromise on the taste of the food. And that cannot be done. But for this very aspiring mobile category of upper class, upper caste youth, taste was a factor that could be acquired. In fact, one of the questions that had also emerged during one of the conversations was about the taste of avocado. And that was a very personal thing, because primarily I do not like the taste of avocado. I don't think it's a tasty fruit or vegetable or what you call it. So I asked them that, why do you spend so much money on it? And they were like, oh, this is healthy. But I also asked them that when we are talking about climate change and you're talking about being environmentally sustainable, isn't this actually increasing the digital footprint of the planet, because you are, practically importing it to Delhi from many places? And then they said that that is a compromise they are ready to make. So there are these issues in terms of where they exert some sort of desire to be environmentally and ethically sustainable, but in others, they're also okay with letting go. So in a way, it's also about priorities, कि आप किसको ऊपर रख रहे हैं और किसको नहीं, in terms of thinking about food. The last bit that I want to talk about before winding up is on digitalization. So there is a reciprocal relationship between demand and supply, and because itna focus hai ki hum healthy khana khayenge, there is a rise of healthy food startups as well as agricultural technology startups. So जो demand and supply है वो साथ में जाता है. ऐसा नहीं है कि मार्केट में डिमांड है तो वो फुलफिल नहीं हो रहा है. एक कोटेशन जो मैंने स्लाइड में डाला है, ये मेरे एक रेस्पोंडेंट ने मुझसे कहा था कि he can browse the products and place an order online and वो next day deliver हो जाता है. Very convenient, and also most of these websites give complete information about how and who grows the products. When I'm talking about digitalization, I think it's also very important to stress that for many of these people, time is a luxury. तो वो जब बार बार कहते हैं कि हम लोग बैठ के काम करते हैं लैपटॉप में, एक पॉइंट ये भी है कि रिग्रेट है कि अगर कॉर्पोरेट जॉब्स में है, ऐसे बिजी जॉब्स में है, एक्सरसाइज का टाइम नहीं मिलता है, मार्केट जाने का भी टाइम नहीं मिलता है बहुत सारी दिनों में. तो आप बैठे बैठे घर में जब ऐसे ऑर्डर कर सकते हो तो आपका काफी जो टाइम है वो बच जाता है. एंड इंफॉर्मेशन जो मिल रहा है कि आपको सामने सामने बोल रहे हैं कि ओके इतने कैलोरीज है इसमें शुगर नहीं है, इसमें वो नहीं है, तो वो इजी बन जाता है. एक रिस्पोंडेंट ने मुझसे ये भी कहा था कि मैं बहुत बाहर का खाना खाता हूँ क्योंकि मैं बहुत लंबे घंटों तक काम करता हूँ, एंड मेरी कुक भी मिस हो जाती है और वो पॉसिबल नहीं होता है. तो मैंने क्या किया है कि मैंने एक ऐप में जिसका नाम फूड दर्जी है, आप लोगों को पता भी होगा किसी किसी को, उसमें एक मील प्लान के लिए सब्सक्राइब कर लिया है. सो दैट मील प्लान इज both tasty and healthy. Now, when we think about ordering in, it's not just about ordering in of food items that are seen as restaurant made, but also home cooked. So now Zomato, for instance, which is a leading food delivery platform, is planning to introduce a feature जो customers को healthy alternative suggest करेंगे. So अगर आप बटर नान ऑर्डर कर रहे हो तो Zomato का AI जो है artificial intelligence, वो पॉप इन करके आपको लो कैलोरी रोटी सजेस्ट करेगी, या फिर अगर आप डेजर्ट भी चूज कर रहे हो तो आपको शुगर फ्री या फिर फ्रूट्स सजेस्ट करेगी. तो आप देख सकते हैं कि जो ये हेल्थ वाला फैक्टर है वो कैसे घुस चुका है हमारे अंदर, एंड इसके लिए कैपिटलिस्ट जो ग्लोबल काइंड ऑफ बिजनेसेस है वो भी उसको मार्केट कर रहे हैं. अगर आप अभी मेट्रो सिटीज में जाएंगे, एक चीज जो मैंने नोटिस किया है वो ये भी है कि देयर इज अ प्रोलिफरेशन ऑफ राइज ऑफ शुगर फ्री आइटम्स, एंड देयर इज आल्सो दिस मार्केटाइजेशन ऑफ डायबिटिक होते तो बोला जाता कि आप मीठा बिल्कुल मत खाओ, लेकिन अभी डॉक्टर लेकिन अभी डॉक्टर भी नहीं कहते कि आप मीठा मत खाओ, वो कहेंगे कि आप शुगर फ्री खाओ. सो there is a connection between those capitalist ideas of medicine, health, and food as well. Let me show you a clipping. This is again from two places which deliver, Getaway and The Guilt, and you can see कि mango ice cream है, उसमें no added sugar है, and इसमें भी एक चॉकलेट है जिसमें भी 0 शुगर एडेड है. तो आपको बोला जा रहा है कि ये PCOS फ्रेंडली है, इसमें कीटो फ्रेंडली है और ये वीगन है. So the market is responding to the demands of the people in terms of what they are asking for. मैंने एग्रीकल्चरल स्टार्टअप्स की बात की थी, तो अगर आप ऐसे देख सकते हो स्क्रीन में मेरे, ये स्वदेशी वे का वेब पेज, होम पेज है, जिसमें आप देख सकते हो कि उनका स्लोगन लिखा हुआ है, हेल्दी ऑर्गेनिक फूड दैट ट्रांसफॉर्म्स इंडियाज विलेजेस, एंड द वे दे मार्केट इट इज आल्सो कि जो 60% रेवेन्यू है वो स्ट्रेट फार्मा को जाता है. तो अगेन बहुत सारे जो लोग हैं वो बोल रहे थे कि जो कैपिटलिज्म में न्यू लिबरल डाइट का ये है प्रोलिफरेशन, वो इससे कम हो जाएगा क्योंकि ये स्मॉल फार्मर कलेक्टिव्स को डायरेक्टली पैसा देंगे. In a way, you can see that there is a justification of their changing preferences of these food products that they see as healthy. ये सात्विक फूड्स का होम पेज है और इसमें भी आप देख सकते हो कि दे आर सेलिंग प्रोडक्ट्स मार्क्ड एज कीटो, ग्लूटेन फ्री, वीगन, रॉ, एटसेट्रा. कॉन्शियस कंजम्पशन ऑफ फूड आइटम्स दैट दे सी एज एनवायरमेंटली सस्टेनेबल. Then the last one, this is AgroStar, again an agricultural startup, and इसमें आप देख सकते हैं कि हिंदी में है, जो लिखाई है वो हिंदी में है, which means कि उनका टारगेट अभी सिर्फ ये इंग्लिश स्पीकिंग अर्बन मिडिल क्लास नहीं है, वो अंदर तक जाना चाहते हैं भारत के रिमोट कॉर्नर्स तक। तो अगर आप ये देख सकते हैं कि the proliferation of technology and the way it is entering the market of food, in the process creating these ideas. Lastly, this is very very interesting, एक है eat in season बोल के people who talk about eating seafood right. So ये लोग ये नहीं बोल रहे कि आप नॉनवेज बिल्कुल मत खाइए, उल्टा ये बोल रहे कि इसको अच्छे से खाइए। तो what they do is they promote a season calendar, which means कि अगर आप किसी सी फूड को एक टाइम पे खा रहे हो तो उससे क्या होगा कि आपका जो संतुलन है एनवायरनमेंट का वो बना रहेगा, वातावरण में कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगा, क्योंकि आप जो फिशेस है या सी फिशेस है उनको ब्रीड करने का टाइम देंगे, उनको ब्रीडिंग सीजन में आप नहीं खाएंगे। सो एथिकल कंजम्पशन ऑफ फूड एंड व्हाई it is promoted is also something than local factors. So essentially the global here is as important as the local, but we have to acknowledge that the local plays a big role in reshaping the global. Understanding in the way that these ideas of healthy food are created, therefore help us in understanding the culture and society of that particular country as well, primarily because food is a window to looking at the larger socio-political global context. And this study that I have so far conducted amongst the upper middle class youth in Delhi about the perceptions of healthy food, those are completely inspired by the understanding of climate change as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, both very, very global factors. Eating healthy food is seen as a resilience tactic that can help them fight the risks and uncertainties that events like the pandemic threw the world's way. And what is also interesting is that eating organic food or vegan food is an aspirational diet, which they see as rooted in one's personal choice. And there is ignorance about eating meat in the Indian context because they completely ignore the social discourse. At the same time, let me reiterate how these consumers use digital technology to make these food choices. So if you look at the organic farmers, they are also using the digital mode to reach out to consumers, which I have not really addressed in this presentation because I'm looking at it from the consumer's side, mostly not from the producer's one. And if you see, the digitalization of food choices are located in the reciprocal relationship that exists between demand and supply for a healthy food and a healthy diet. And what is healthy, interestingly, as many sociologists have argued, it goes beyond statistical indices and numbers. It's actually governed by social conditions, perceptions, and availability. So in cities like Delhi, new food environments, equipment, and foodstuffs have contributed greatly to a diversification of the diet, and things that were considered very, very different have become big part of the local. For instance, I'm going to go back to the example of the avocado and the strawberry, and कैसे वो हमारे diet का हिस्सा बन चुका है, particularly for urban upper middle class Indians, when even 20 years back, these were seen as very luxury items. So there is a confluence of the politics of global and local factors in constructing this idea of what food is healthy. Okay, I'll wind up here. Thank you so much again, and I look forward to your comments and suggestions.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Rituparna Patgiri. It was a very interesting session. Now it's open for discussions. Participants, feel free to post your questions or queries in the chat box. We have one query, or almost, I guess it's an experience which she has shared from her field study. Itmiya Behera. I just read it out. Maybe you can just comment on it and add on to it. Good evening, ma'am. The state government program to promote organic farming, even the NGOs who are associated with it, only taking these organic produce, millets, potato, oil, in the brackets she's put Koraput, Odisha, seeds with minimum MSP price. There is no local market for organic products. Even lots of farmers are struggling for the subsidy. And the value addition program, like different mixtures, sweets, roast cakes from finger millets, ragi, they're not working in rural parts. So it is extracted to low town places because there is no proper market linkages. Similarly, McDonald's has planned to prepare ragi burger, but those are producing their standard of living is poor, and also rules and regulations for organic certification serious concern. Thank you, ma'am, for the lecture. I just shared her experience. She just shared experiences. You want to comment on it or take it further?
Thank you, Itimai, for that comment. Let me just very quickly make a remark, which is that I acknowledge that there is a problem in the market linkages. And I think people who are working on organic food now, there's a scholar in JNU, a PhD scholar, whom you may reach out to, Sohini Bhattacharjee, on organic food. And she is also looking at how these linkages work out in terms of the organic food market. The problem is that organic food is seen as an elitist product, and that is exactly where the state policies need interventions. However, there is also an acknowledgement that we have gone far beyond in the capitalist system, and probably a complete return to organic food items is not going to work out in a country like India, where there is so much population. And if you don't produce industrially or in a mass manner, not everybody will have access to food, leave alone healthy food.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Rituparna Pant. May I come in? Dr. Deepti, may I ask a question if I'm audible?
Yeah, you can ask a question.
Thank you for this enlightened lecture, madam. My one query is, because the sample size is 12 plus 8, I think 20. So maybe your whole study will be more focused on secondary data as well as these small sample of this 20 people. So how you are justifying? Is it okay, going ahead with this small data? First thing. Second thing, ma'am, when we talk about healthy foods, so healthy foods, the definition which I'm hearing from your side, I think two things we didn't touch in this healthy diet. One is nutritional aspect, and another one is adulteration in food. So your, I think, study is focused more on your topic. So if we would like to take these two things, first is nutrition and another is adulteration in food. So how we are going to look at this healthy food in a whole perspective? Thank you.
Okay, let me address all the questions if possible. I can see some in the chat box also.
Yeah, that would be better.
Yeah.
Also. Should I? Yeah.
No, I can see them, Dr.
For
Deepti,
the benefit of everyone?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We have Aranya Vadera who has made a remark. Food has been the locus of much violence, from casteism, Islamophobia to gendered oppression. We see how food manifests as a site that maintains alterity. My question arises from the vegan debate that manifests itself different in West versus in India, where casteism also plays a role in maintaining the superiority of vegan veg diet. Doesn't the problem rightly rest on capitalism, mass production, industrialization, and dehumanization of animals within industries, rather than eating of the meat? For capitalist oppression of production exists within the gambit of vegan food as well. Hence, how do we as academicians and students look at food sociologically while being able to recognize both the violence and as well as the role of food in building community love without disregarding the social context, changing context in which it is understood? Do you think cultural, I think there's a question by somebody else also. That's the first one. Yashika asks, do you think cultural revivalism can help in achieving sustainable food goals? I think the valuable eating habits we get from the West is repacked. We as Indians overlook our culture due to colonization, modernization, and globalization.
Okay.
Rituparna,
Thank
shall I
you.
ask my
Yes.
question also? My question also?
Can I answer them so that I don't
Yeah.
forget? Yeah.
Right, sure,
Okay.
sure.
First, to answer Dr. Rajul Pan's two questions. Firstly, the one about sample size. Well, I disagree that it's a small sample size because it's a qualitative study. It's not a quantitative one. So, in most qualitative studies, if there are in-depth interviews and observations, ethnographic details, then I think these observations can be made for a larger population, drawing from a smaller sample size as well. At the same time, it's also a small sample size because I'm doing a study of elites. So that means that in India, it is not possible to really interview a lot of people, primarily because if you look at the income inequality report as well, only top 1% have 40% wealth. So in context, if one has to do a study on upper middle class, the numbers are less, especially primarily because at the moment I have only done it in New Delhi. However, because it is an ethnographic qualitative study, I think the sample size is still manageable in that sense. The second question about nutrition, well, I did not specifically address the issue of nutrition because when they're thinking about organic or healthy food, if one uses the word synonymous, two words synonymously, they're not really thinking about nutrition, but also what forms their perceptions. And thirdly, about food adulteration, that's yes, not part of this study at all. I think that's a completely different subject which can be addressed in a much more nuanced manner by someone who is more of an expert on that. But thank you so much for the interesting interventions. I hope I've been able to answer. This question about cultural revivalism, I'm not sure if going back to what we ate many years ago is the solution, but what is being talked about in terms of sustainability is going back to local diets, indigenous food diets, and that is about eating locally. So which means that one doesn't really eat packaged processed food which are necessarily seen as healthy from different parts of the world, but what is indigenous. I can give an example from Northeast India, and many of these communities who are seen as indigenous communities eat very, very locally, which also is exhibited in the kind of health practices that they have. So in a way, yes, probably the idea is to eat local. One thing that I can mention is about how, because of global factors of consumption, several ideas of seasonal food items sort of, went away from the plate. For instance, at one point of time, bhindi, okra, or lady's finger as we call it, was only available during a season, but now you find it round the corner. So I think these are some ways in which sustainability can be put in check, although I'm not really sure about the mechanism that it can be, followed. Then there's a question about food and violence, and this is something that I have tried to address as well, that in the vegan debate in the West, it's a question of attacking capitalism. If you see, they are talking about climate change and the relationship with capitalism, but in the Indian context, we have social factors which guide this idea of vegetarianism, as vegetarianism is connected to caste and religious purity in many ways. So we have to address this question, because when we are talking about the role of food in building community or love, we cannot really disregard the social context as well, primarily because in the West, there is not a purity pollution hierarchy, but in the Indian context, there is. Yes, Dr. Deepti, your question.
Yeah, and a few more messages, but before I go to them, it's a quick question. The question I was the concept of vegetarianism is itself slightly confusing for me. What is vegetarian in some parts of India is not an vegetarian in some parts of India. Like what is vegetarian in the Northeast is not vegetarian in South India. Likewise, what is Jain food served in the flight is not actually Jain food in the real Jain homes. Likewise, what is the vegan in the strictly the Western countries is not the vegan diet our Indian population is following. In that way, how did you conceptualize and how is your conception of vegetarianism? Because it's so much close to all of us, and it's how do you do it in your research? That was my first question.
Thank you for that question. I do have like a section in the paper where I go into details, which I didn't in the PPT or the presentation. But yes, you are right, because when we think of vegetarianism, there are so many different contexts of how we understand it. I mean, in the part of the world that I come from, eating fish is vegetarian for many people, because they'll say, oh, we don't eat non-veg, but they're eating egg and fish all the time. So I think it's a very regional kind of understanding, which has ecological connotations. Because if, let's say, Assam is a riverine state, eating fish is very much a part of this indigenous and local diet. So there was also this understanding of how, if we are trying to eat sustainable food items, vegetarianism in many contexts, like in the Northeast, will not be ecologically sustainable, because these are places where there is a great connection ecologically to meat and fish, right? So in that sense, can we really understand or collate a global understanding of vegetarianism to India? And in India, when we talk about vegetarianism, there are many specifications that we make, that I might not eat onion, I might not eat garlic, I might not eat this. But in the West, I think it is very clear that you are eating vegetables and not the meat and the egg. So I think that kind of distinction is very difficult to make in India, because of the regional variations in understanding who a vegetarian is.
Yeah, like fine, as long as you're taken that into consideration in your work, that's perfectly fine. And we have Nihalika Yadav, who's asking, during the times of her grandmother, millets were rejected by the rich because they were used to be considered as food that the poor ate. But now it is a millets only which are termed as healthy food, but the poor are unable to afford. Okay, and likewise, Shalini response, like under capitalism, all commodity categorized as belonging to poor or rich, on how much interest in it generates is in the boardroom and revenue meeting. So remark, you can just respond to whatever you feel is relevant and whatever you're comfortable. And there is one question which Hanifa asked, are we increasingly facing health issues like PCOS among the teenage girls and career-oriented women? Why do doctors often prescribe oral medications but not recommend sustainable dietary solutions? What is your opinion on this? And Moni Yadav talks, to what extent does the organic label serve as a marker of both health benefits and socioeconomic status? And how might this dual role perpetuate existing inequalities in food access and consumption?
Yeah, I think Nihalika's question about perceptions, about millets, is interesting, primarily because the way millets were eaten and grown, it was seen as something which poor people ate in many regions. But because now it has become non-affordable and the market prices have gone up, it has become a luxury food item, and that is what capitalism does. It is sort of connected to the other question on prescription of oral medicines and not dietary changes, because a lot of these respondents, when they said they don't trust the Indian medical system, the allopathic one, said exactly the same thing, that doctors only give medicines, they don't want you to get cured, reason being that their fees will stop flowing. Now, as sociologists or as social scientists, we can only listen to these perceptions and infer in terms of what they mean, and sociologically what ideas they communicate. But the perceptions that people have is that the capitalist system dictates that you buy things in order to solve issues, and many of these non-communicable diseases, this the message that is being promoted is that you can treat them with oral medication. So this is one thing. However, if you look at what a lot of these practitioners on health apps do, is that they say that you should practice dieting or change your diet, which is why many people would be comfortable also following them, because they are, if catching these diseases early on in their lives, they would want some idea of solving without consuming a lot of medicines. So I think that is where the forces of capitalism do come in. Now, interestingly, all of this is also speculation and commentary on how allopathy and Indian medical system functions. We cannot really say that this is the truth or this is, false. It is ultimately a question of medical expertise and something that only medical practitioners can have the specialized training on commenting. We can only infer the social meanings. I don't know, if that makes sense, but I guess as sociologists in the room and others are also there, they'll also agree that, we cannot comment on the medical part of whether or not it is correct or not. We can only make the social inferences.
And there's a question by Rajesh Kumar Sahu. He states some E-code chemicals are banned in core countries but remain used in periphery countries. Looking forward for insights.
I think it's a question of great global inequity, as we saw even in the case of food adulteration, that Nestle was using sugar in their infant food products in Africa, but not in the US. So it's clearly something that has to do with how global inequity persists, primarily because in the US, there are more checks on how infant food needs to be made. But in Africa, they were, it was possible for a company like Nestle to overrun those kinds of ethical and food quality standard checks. You will also see a lot of news reports in recent times coming out about adulteration in spices in India, as well as in sugar, as well as in honey. Now, those indicate that the food quality standard checks in these parts of the world are not as strong as it would be in Western countries. So there's inequity in the management of food quality itself.
Yeah, and I really found this Dr. Rajul Pant's question about nutrition and adulteration very relevant. By and large, we know that India doesn't follow the standards about the food, especially the packaged food. It's very low compared to the. It's not strict, so a lot of adulteration happens. That how it is addressed in your study. I'm sure you answered it, but that's there continues to remain a challenge as to when you're talking about healthy food.
Mm-hmm. I think adulteration is something that I want to maybe address in the next part of the fieldwork, considering that it has also become an issue that we are speaking about a lot after these news items came out. So I'm going to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think there's one question on methodology, but before that, I have one thing to share. See, there's also one remark about Odisha, the same person, Itimia. She just shares that about, don't know about the other states, but in Odisha, the government instructed the farmer who are producing millets first to keep their millets for their own consumption and then give it to the mandi and local market. So shared her shared an information, and I was really impressed when you about this food work on food with something which is very close to us, but not much work has happened. And you're very clear about the population size also. But I found it might be you will come out with interesting, mind blowing results. Perhaps if you do the same qualitative study, perhaps in Koraput district, but not with the elite. If you do with the tribal community, probably you may come out with the same response, same findings, but definitely the perceptions on the idea of their health could be different, and the forces and the forces they which share that influence could be different, and the first three questions could be different, but the overall findings could be the same because they live on the by and large by this millet diet, which is a core diet in this part of the world. In that way, it is very paradoxical.
That actually sounds very interesting. I might actually do it. Why not?
Yeah. I think there's one more remark by Nisha. Studies have found that people living in urban areas lack vitamin D. This case has been found true in cities like Delhi and Mumbai in absence of sunlight in urban areas to synthesize vitamin B. What should be the ways a person can access health vitamin D? Could you please talk about urban planning to enhance the sunlight exposure? Now you're a doctor now.
I think there was a question about methodology as well.
Yes.
I'll just address it. Yes.
Yeah. Can you please elaborate on content analysis aspect of research? Yeah, I just missed out.
Yeah. So when we are thinking about content analysis, what I mean is that I have looked at a lot of social media and digital content to gather material for my research, particularly social media of nutritionists, health practitioners, some of these influencer doctors that a lot of people now follow, as well as websites of commonly used health-related applications and portals like Ditch the Guilt, Healthify Me, Healthline, MyFitnessPal, Parafit, Practo, as well as all these healthy food ordering startups like Fooddarji and Healthy Food, Ghar Ka Khana. So this is what I mean by content analysis, that you spend time going through these social media and digital media content and look at how you can incorporate insights, pictures, visuals into your research. A very quick comment on the urban planning part. In fact, studies, I'm not sure about sunlight per se, but studies in the US have shown that if you do proper neighborhood planning in which you have access to healthy food products in neighborhoods within walking miles of residential areas, then the eating patterns of people change. So what these studies indicate is that in white neighborhoods, you have more supermarkets that have healthy food items available compared to so-called black neighborhoods. And they sort of trace it to an urban planning problem connected with racism, because we know that fast food is also associated with black people and then consequent health problems. So therefore there is a connection with of urban planning with diet. In India, geography and you did this study on how the growth and growing of fruit trees in public places increased fruit consumption, particularly of poorer communities, because that would be free for everyone. But now that there is more and more deforestation and cutting of trees, who is it impacting? So I'm not really sure about sunlight, but yes, urban planning and healthy food do have interconnections with identity.
And Asmita Singh has another technical question. How do you see the usage of MSGs, particularly in India?
I honestly don't know. I'm sorry, I'll pass on that one.
What is the question?
MSGs on
Okay.
MSG. And Rajesh Kumar has another question. Malthus food and population era reliability of organic farming, taking remark of collapse of Sri Lanka's economy. Okay, this is not clear.
Yeah, I am not sure what it means. So if you could
This
clarify.
comment thing.
Yes, if I may come in. Actually, it is said that Sri Lanka's economy collapsed because of organic farming. And there are proxy reasons for promoting that organic farming. There were a lot of money involved, and proxy, organizations were involved. So one of the studies said that Sri Lankan economic lost because they promoted organic economy. So actually, it is not. There were several factors. That's why their economic collapse. Not only, but yes, there was very big, red tape and corruption for this organic farming.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think that is the pitfall of capitalism. It's very difficult to now let go of this system as well. And Dr. Pant has answered your question.
Yeah. We have Shreya Acharya asking that I did have a doubt regarding the producers of food, primarily farmers, procurers, and the makers, those who cook, package, produce consumer versions of new crops. Is this global seesaw game of what is right for everyone nutritionally? What position do these producers find themselves in, since they are the ones handling everything tangentially from the grassroots? I'm truly not so aware of the producer's conditions as much as I'm aware of the nature of rate, favor, and quality of food.
I think I am not the right person to answer this question, because I have not spoken to producers and farmers. I have spoken to consumers as well as people who disseminate and collate information on healthy food. So it's either medical practitioners, nutritionists, and healthy food experts, or consumers. So I don't think I'll be the right person to answer this question in terms of what farmers and producers, think. There are others who are working on it. One name I had already mentioned. If you're interested, you could reach out to her. She's also published on organic farmers. So, Sohini Bhattacharji's work, you could definitely look up on organic farming. She is also a PhD student and an early career researcher herself, but I'm sure she'll have more to say on this than me.
We have all the questions. Vaishali ma'am, you have any questions?
No, I was just listening to it very intently. So when you were talking about black neighborhood and basically white neighborhood, I just remembered Frederick Engels' work on British labor force and how laborers have more energy dense carbohydrate food, and probably the elites had more protein rich food. So probably the distinction started sometime around 1870s and it still remains the same. So that's a very interesting thing to know. Of course, nothing to do with the urban planning, but the way classes are being treated and the way food is treated is very interesting. I just remembered that. So
yeah, I think a lot of people are talking about this new book on Dalit kitchens, which has been written by Shahu Patole. And when I was reading it, I could see so many similarities with Pierre Bourdieu's work, because he says that food is connected to class and how working classes eat. And the descriptions are very similar to what Patole makes in terms of caste in India. So I think the similarities continue to exist in terms
even
of.
I was that day, I was talking to you on phone. Remember that? I mean, it's like how Indians look at food more of a feeling thing or something which is in quantities, versus the way probably Western food, especially European, looks more at aesthetics and class marker in that sense. So of course that has come to us because there is nothing now first world, second world. We also have a small first world in this third world. So we cannot really say Indian versus Western, but definitely we see this kind of distinction as well as Guru talks about. So yeah, Deepti, you can go ahead.
There's one more query by Itimea. She asks how to bring tribals to mainstream of these organic food practices. Yeah, Rituparna, before you take over, I feel in some parts, these are the tribals who are growing this organic food, millets. So in that context, it's a part of their culture. So at least in some parts of India. So yeah, you may go ahead with the response.
Yes. The thing is that I think in many places, tribals are already in the mainstream. So if you look at, for instance, Northeast India, they are the ones who are the protectors of indigenous organic food items.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the mainstreaming is also something which should be questioned in a way. And if one is talking about organic food practices and bringing them to the mainstream, we should also ask this question: do they want it to be in the mainstream? Because a lot of them are also talking about cultural appropriation, that their foods are being appropriated in a capitalist market, which is happening to rice beer in Northeast India, where it has become an exotic food item that global audiences try for fun and leisure, but it doesn't really mean anything, because ultimately the idea of them consuming dirty food or smelly food still stays with them. So essentially, what mainstreaming are we talking about? What is this idea of appropriation of cultural and food practices? I think they do make some sort of sense before we think about it. I'm not saying that this doesn't mean that we don't give them fair share of the revenue or profit, if there is any. That should be done, but I think it's also important to take their perceptions into account. I'm sorry it became dark because there's an electricity cut suddenly. I'm not sure why. Yeah, it generally doesn't happen at IIT. It's rare, but it's been raining very heavily. I was telling you about the heat wave, but it's also very unpredictable. So it just started raining. Yeah.
We can see you. So,
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I think there are no more interventions. Ma'am, Vaishali ma'am, should we go ahead with the?
Yeah, you can wind up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you all for being a part of this lecture series. Now, I request my colleague, Dr. Saubhagya Lakshmi Singh, who is an assistant professor, Department of Sociology, Central University of Odisha. Dr. Saubhagya, will you please come on screen to deliver the vote of thanks?
Yes, ma'am.
Please,
And am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am, for giving this opportunity. Namaskar. Good evening to all. So I was listening this lecture from last 1 hour. It was so engaging and precise that I didn't get any chance for any kind of distraction. If you see the concept, the term food politics, it is a broad one which includes all aspects of food system from production to consumption and how these aspects affect people's health and well-being. Ma'am, what you have said, if I can capture your words in few lines, I can say you gave a brief background of your topic, give a historical background. You said about Ayurvedic prescription to from Ayurvedic prescription to neoliberal ideas of health, and how healthy food, organic are contested one, and these are controversial topics. Then you talked about green revolution. From the period of green revolution, how a diversified food crop system changed into a monocrop, that into wheat or rice. Ma'am, in this context, you also mentioned about millets. Millets, at one point of time, we'll see before this green revolution, it was the food of poor people. Now it has changed to the food of rich people. But now you also talked about who can afford it. And in between, you also you talked about exploitation of capitalist market. After that, you showed some picture of advertisement, and you told who orders and who delivers. You connected it with caste, class, religion, ethnicity, and regional places also. In this context, ma'am, millet, I want to just give my experience or what I have read recently, that there was a story regarding millet and rice, that rice was considered as Lakshmi and millet was considered as Alakshmi. And there was a deep story into that. I'll not go into that. Then you also talked about wealth and appearance. In that you talked about Western diet and Indian healthy oily food. In that you talked about keto diet, intermediate fasting, and in this context, I am reminded of a proverb that is, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Actually, it has less to do with health. It has more to do with politics, because when there was heavy or overproduction of apple in Europe, they came up with a strategy that they came up with these lines that an apple a day keeps the doctor away, so that people will be motivated and will buy this apple. So I could connect with that when you said this thing. Ma'am, you also talked about digitalization, demand, supply, and you also talked about advertisement in Hindi. In this context, I am reminded of an article which published in Sociological Bulletin. That's name is 2 Minutes Maggie. Representation of women and children in advertisement. How it has divided into 3 phases: beginning, mid period, then third phase is after banning what happened, and how it is reaching to the local areas. Before Maggie, it was confined to the place of house, home, within kitchen. After banning it, it reached to hotels, it reached to hostels, then dhaba and other places. So how it was transformed the food of rich people to the food of poor people, to get a diversified audience, or you can say customers for Maggie. I feel I should stop with this because my speech would not go beyond with what you said. You talked about more than 1 hour, so I should not go beyond 3 to 4 minutes. Now I'm coming to the concluding part of giving vote of thanks. Ma'am, when I saw this topic for the first time, I made a mark in my calendar so that I will not forget this date. I thought I will attend this lecture, but Dr. Dipti Sankar made me an active participant of this event by handovering the concluding part of this lecture. Ma'am, I'm starting from you. Thank you so much for giving your valuable time. And it was so enriching, not only for me, but for everyone who attended this lecture. And we are looking forward for such kind of intellectual treats from your side in near future. Then, in this occasion, I want to extend my deepest thanks to the Vice Chancellor of Central University of Odisha, Principal of the St. Mira's College, Pune, Dattaji Rao's Kadam College, and their respective heads of the Department of Sociology. Actually, an event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels, the wheels started rolling months ago. So actually, we are backed by a good team. And in this context, Dr. Baisali Divakar, convener of the lecture series, Dr. Baisali Joshi, Dr. Arjun Jadhav, Dr. Deepti Sankar, coordinator of the events and convener of the RC14 Globalization in Society, and all the members of RC14. Actually, I'm sort of words to give my gratitude to them. This event would not have been meaningful without the active participation of our online participants. Your queries and your questions actually helped the speaker to give a wider coverage to this topic. So thank you all. Last but not the least, thank you to one and all for making this event memorable. Thank you. Namaskar. Have a good day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
once
you.
again.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rituparna. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Rituparna. Yeah, it was very, very interesting.
Very
And
engaging. Yes. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.